Boom. Wow, that resolution looks pretty bad. I'm not John Crump, but I'm live, and I am here with a fellow Florida man, Luis or Lewis. He doesn't care as long as you pronounce it right. As long as you don't say who's the coffee farmer? Is it
Juan Valdez?
Juan Valdez, yeah. All
Yes.
right. Lewis, good to see you, man. Been seeing a lot of you lately, in person and, of course, on John Crump Live. How's it going?
Yep, it's doing good, brother. It's good to see you, and it is fantastic that we are teaming up and we are taking it to the state of Florida.
Amen, brother. Amen. So, speaking of taking it to the state of Florida, Crump wrote an article on this. Crump will not be with us today, unfortunately, but this Daytona Beach cop now he arrested a 20-year-old for having an AR pistol in the back of the car. He was with his father. The commentary during the video was pretty bad. I think the guy's got a great lawsuit brewing. Not that you want to do that, but look, if your rights are violated, I'm all in on that. And because also a big door slamming on your junk is good notice, a shot across the bow of these people to like, hey, know the freaking law. So, Lewis, you were a cop. Were you state police or what kind of service did you do?
So I started off as a uniformed patrolman working for a municipality down in Dade County for one of the larger cities in Dade. Did that for a couple of years. And then I jumped over to the state and I finished out my career in the state doing protective operations for Governor Rick Scott when Rick Scott was governor at the time, and the legislature. And then from there I jumped over and did financial crimes. But my time pushing a marked unit was in good old Dade County, and did school resource work, was a school resource officer, a little bit of internal affairs. So I've been around. I had a well-rounded law enforcement career, and I just didn't sit behind a desk. So when I saw what happened in Daytona Beach, it really pissed me off. And it pissed me off because when I was a cop, I made sure that I knew what the law was. I made sure that I knew that I was in a position of authority to not violate the citizens' rights. Remember, when I took that oath, when I swore to uphold the Constitution, that power that was vested in me, it wasn't vested in me by the governor, it wasn't vested in me by the legislature, it wasn't vested in me by the state or the city mayor. It was vested in me by the people I was sworn to serve. So I understood that everything I did as a cop that ultimately went to the public I was serving. I was there to serve them. They entrusted me with the authority to enforce the law. I made sure that it was done in a just and civil manner and that people's rights weren't violated. But Daytona Beach, this is not the first time they've done it. They just basically threw that out the window.
That's pretty unbelievable. So, do you want to talk about what happened, how it happened?
Yeah. So, on the nationally syndicated show On Patrol Live, Daytona Beach PD did a traffic stop for the suspicion of a stolen vehicle. Turns out the vehicle wasn't stolen by the driver. He had a legitimate bill of sale. He purchased the vehicle with good intentions and full faith, believing that it was a legitimate purchase. But during that stop, the officer discovered an AR pistol in the vehicle and immediately made a statement that since the driver of the vehicle was under the age of 21 but over the age of 18, an adult, that he was in violation of state law. That, oh, you can't own a handgun at under the age of 21. You can't possess one. You can't have one in the vehicle, blah, 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 blah. And he made this statement multiple times. Now, mind you, Florida has an under 21 purchase ban, which is completely unconstitutional. And of course, we are fighting that tooth and nail. But Florida also has an under 21 carry ban, which is part of our lawsuit, as you're well aware. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. None of that matters because both Florida and federal law says that you could legally possess a handgun under the age of 21, and you could legally have it securely encased in the vehicle under the age of 21. And the state definition of securely encased is very loose. In the glove box, closed. In the center console, closed. And I am quoting state statute. With a shoebox with the lid on it, in a zippered case, zipped up. That all qualifies as securely encased. So if this kid, and he's not a kid, let me rephrase it. Right, this young adult had a pistol in his vehicle, and I'm betting you 9 out of 10 times that that thing was securely encased. It was probably in a zippered pouch and a book bag and whatever it was. And guess what? That's fine to have. But this officer made statements on national television that are contradictory to state law. And on top of that, the show's hosts back in the studio basically labeled this guy as a felon. Mm-hmm. Made statements, he's probably a convicted felon in possession of a stolen vehicle and a stolen gun, blah, 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 blah. Except that wasn't the case. He wasn't a felon. He wasn't the person that stole the vehicle. He was an unwitting person that purchased the vehicle in good faith. And his own father on the scene simply told the officer, hey, what the heck's going on here? My kid purchased this vehicle, all this. And the officer, mind you, he's not just the officer, he was a sergeant, blows up on the dad and basically threatens the dad that he'll arrest him for interfering with an investigation.
Right.
Threatens the son, that, I'm going to arrest you for this. When in the end, none of that happened. The driver wasn't even arrested, but the driver did have his rights violated. And you know the old saying, you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride. And the ride in of itself is the punishment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
I'm assuming they took him into custody. What happened?
From my understanding, they took the firearm into custody. They didn't take him into custody.
And what about the car?
I believe the car was possibly impounded because it was registered as a stolen vehicle. Which, hey, it's not the first time that's happened. I remember cases down in Dade County where someone bought a vehicle from a used car lot.
Oh my God!
It turns out, hey, the car was registered as stolen somewhere else. It happens. People purchase things in good faith. It's not the first time it's happened. It's not the last time it's happened. Mm-hmm. But the way the officer treated the entire situation is appalling, especially because this isn't the first time Daytona Beach has done this. As you know, with our lawsuit, you had the incident with Mr. John Leggett, a resident of Daytona Beach, who was feeding his pet tortoise with his young daughter, his preteen daughter, when an aggressive pit bull menacingly charged his kid. Now, at the same time that was going on, Daytona Beach PD showed up on the neighbor's property to do a welfare check of some sort. So while Mr. Leggett is trying to get his kid in the house safely, away from this dog, he's there trying to get the attention of Daytona Beach PD for assistance. Daytona Beach PD, instead of doing the right thing, they see Mr. Leggett is on his own property without a shirt, but he has a holstered Glock tucked in his waistband and inside the waist holster. Instead of trying to assist him of keeping his kids safe, No, they slap cuffs on him
Oh
and
my
charge
God.
him with openly carrying on his own property, which, as you know, is one of the few limited exemptions in Florida where you can legally open carry.
Right.
And they've taken a step further after Mr. Leggett informs them of state statute saying, hey, look, under Chapter 790, open carry is legal. The arresting officer tells them to shut up. Another officer shows up on scene and kind of goes, you know, man, I think he could open carry on his yard. No, you're wrong, bro. I got this arrest. This is right. And goes a step further, points a loaded firearm at Mr. Leggett's daughter.
Holy crap.
Oh yeah, goes on that. And then when Mr. Leggett's wife and the mother of their daughter shows up, they threaten the mother that they're going to call Child Protective Services on the kid.
Oh, that every parent, you say CPS to a parent, and that's like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like swatting. It really.
And the worst thing of all of that, Mr. Leggett did spend a night in county, had a mugshot taken, was arrested, had to fight it with the state attorney's office. The state attorney's office dropped the charges. But you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride.
Wow.
Because of that, he had to go through his employer had a zero tolerance policy for arrest. He was suspended from employment. He had the social stigma of being arrested, having a mugshot, having an arrest record. He had to prove his innocence. He had to go through all of that for simply being a father taking care of his daughter on his own yard while exercising his Second Amendment rights. And as a father myself, I find that to be egregious and insulting that was done none other by Daytona Beach PD.
Wow. It just seems to me like, all right, so let me roll back. I got my first carry permit in Minnesota. Now, I was, living and working in Minneapolis or just out legit. A lot of the places that got burned down after George Floyd, I would drive by every day. I'm like, oh yeah, I shopped at that Walmart that's burned down. I shopped at that Target that's burned down. I shopped at all of that. So in Minnesota, you get a carry permit and you can carry any quantity of an item in any way you want. So if you want to throw an AR-15 on your back and walk around with it, that's fine. One of the guys that was renewing his permit, so you have to do recurrent training, he was at a park, I think it was with his daughter, and he had the gun on his hip. In some people, like the instructor I had at the time, he would make sure when he was with his kids and out in public, he would carry just so it looked more normal. So you saw a guy with his kids carrying a gun, open carry.
Yep.
And the cops had no idea what the law was. And they, they disarmed him and they tried to arrest him. And finally somebody said, hey, wait a second. You need to look this up. It's like, hey, you take my gun from me. That's fine. Just please look up the law. And, they stopped him. They disarmed him. And it's amazing to me that I always associated, I guess, watching TV as a kid, cops with guns and that they knew everything about guns.
No.
And you come to find out, maybe Lewis, I'm not a cop. You've got a million times more experience than I do. I don't know if they have more experience writing speeding tickets than with guns or what. But I was always shocked at the lack of knowledge that a cop had with firearms. I'm not saying broadly like that. I'm saying I had some experience, some personal and some secondhand experience. I'm like, really?
Look, I can tell you from personal experience when I was an on-duty officer, when I was still sworn, working for a municipal agency down in Dade County. I was off duty. I was riding my motorcycle on the Palmetto Expressway. And all I was doing, I was heading home. I was following the speed limit, nothing. A marked Miami-Dade PD unit was passing me on the right-hand side. to get off on the 122nd Street exit. I was in the center lane. Of course, it's South Florida. I'm in shorts. I'm wearing a t-shirt, wearing my helmet. What's happening? My shirt's flapping in the breeze. My Glock's visible. He slams on the brakes, pulls in behind me, and pulls me over on the following exit, on the Miami Lakes Drive exit. And at gunpoint, he yells at me, "Get off the bike, blah, blah, blah. Let me see your hands." And, I'm there like, "Whoa, hey, man, just to let you know, I'm an off-duty cop. I'm going to slowly reach for my credentials with my other hand. Here you go." And right then and there, it's like an off switch. He was like, "Oh, okay, you cool, man. Yeah, if you were anyone else, I would have cuffed and stuffed you and taken you down to county jail for open carrying. But since you're a cop, it's cool. You can go home." Now, mind you,
Wow.
this was about 2012-ish, give or take.
Yeah.
Because in 2011, Florida passed a bill for accidental exposure. Originally, it was an open carry bill going through the legislature, and the Republican Senate majority gutted the bill from being open carry to accidental exposure. And the way it was written was that if there was a brief and accidental exposure, it's not an arrestable offense. Well, I had a brief and accidental exposure, and the only reason why I wasn't arrested wasn't because it wasn't an arrestable offense. It was because I had a piece of tin in my wallet. If I was John Q. Public, I would have been arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
As you said, for training, I can tell you this. When I went through the police academy in the early 2000s, there was no training on how to handle a law-abiding citizen being armed. It wasn't the topic discussed. The topic was non-cop with gun threat. The idea of the public actually exercising their Second Amendment rights was something completely foreign in concept to the police academy curriculum. And mind you, every academy in the state of Florida has to follow FDLE's CJSTC, the Florida Department of Justice's, or the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Criminal Justice Standard and Training Commission. They write the curriculum. They write the minimum requirements for training, for in-service training at agencies, for the police academy, all that. And it was a foreign concept. When I worked for a state agency, we were doing in-service training. And one of the things we were discussing was the recognition of Florida CCW permits. And I was like, "Oh, cool, finally, hey." And the state training instructor said, "If you see anyone in Florida that has a Florida CCW permit and an out-of-state driver's license, you arrest him." And I was like, "Wait, hold on a sec. We issue permits to non-residents.
Yes.
That's the thing in Florida. Our permit is recognized in a bunch of states because of that. Because a lot of people, they get the Florida permit because it's harder for them to get their own in-state permit. We do this." And the instructor was like, "Wait, what? We do this?" I'm like,
Oof.
"Yeah, we do this." So of course they had to look up the information. They had to go to the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services website and be like, "Oh my God, you're right, Valdez. We do this." I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding. I'm not pulling this out of my butt out of thin air just to make you look bad. I'm bringing this up because people's rights shouldn't be violated."
Right. Wow.
So
yeah, so in Minnesota, when I was doing my training in Minneapolis, Hennepin County, the instructor told us, and I was the only one that wasn't a Minnesota resident, that once you get your permit, file for the Florida permit, because that gets you a whole bunch of other staits.
Yeah, back in the day, it was like 35, 36 states. Before this was long before you had permitless carry, where most states went to basically universal reciprocity. Back then, it was only certain permits are good in certain states.
Yep. Yeah. So that's one of the first things I knew of, and I'm trying to think what year that was. So this is probably more than 20 years ago that I even knew that.
Yeah.
So it is pretty amazing to me that these things occur. And you know, we talk about Florida being the gunshine state and all of that. Uh, we're we're one of 4 states where you can't open carry. You know, it's Illinois, California, Hawaii, and New
No,
York.
Hawaii has open carry. So right now it's Florida, Illinois, Connecticut, New
Oh,
York, and
DC.
California is ambiguous.
Oh,
So
okay.
California has it to where if a county is under a certain population, then you could open carry an unloaded firearm with the sheriff's permission or something like that.
Oh,
It's not a universal ban like how it is in Florida. Florida is
hmm.
universal. So basically, and and one of the things that people, well, you could open carry in Florida if you're hunting or fishing. And my response
Right.
to that is, yeah, you could also open carry in New York if you're hunting too. It's hunting, but it's not open carry. It's not
Right.
every day you're an everyday citizen going about your day freely exercising your Second Amendments.
Yeah.
And the issue with Florida law is the core of it is written that possession and carrying of a firearm is a criminal act, and there are certain listed exemptions that exempt you from it being a criminal act.
Mm.
And most of that is written to where it's an affirmative defense, meaning that you could completely be following the law, like what happened with Mr. Leggett, and you could still be arrested, and you have to prove in the court and to the state attorney's office that you were listed under one of those, that you're covered under one of those listed exemptions. That's the screwed up thing of Florida. There is no right to keep and bear arms in Florida. It's only a privilege under the law because our state constitution was written back in the 1890s when ex-Confederates regained control of the legislature. And the first thing they wanted to do was disarm freed blacks. So they wrote the state version of the Second Amendment to be, you have the right to keep and bear arms, comma, but the legislature has the right to regulate the method of carry. And they did that so they could create laws under Jim Crow to disarm freed blacks. And we had a state Supreme Court case in 1941, Watson v. Stone, where a white guy got arrested for having a gun in his vehicle. And I'm not making his name up. This is the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court at the time, Rutherford Buford. He is not an extra from the Dukes of Hazzard. But to paraphrase his opinion, he basically says, yep, I know of these laws. These laws were passed in the late 1890s, early 1900s to disarm blacks. I estimate 80 to 90% of the white population is in violation of these laws. We don't enforce it against them. If this case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, it would be found unconstitutional. Mind you, he said that in 1941.
Wow.
And to this day, the core root of those laws are still enforced. To this day.
Wow. Wow. And it's, we talk about all gun control is racist or has racist origins. And it's pretty amazing to me that, well, I mean, I'm going to make a Democrat reference here, but um, the Democrats were the party that was the party of the KKK.
Yep.
They were the party that, was in favor of slavery, protested the anti-lynching laws. Al Gore's father filibustered the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So when the great swap, like halftime on a football team, Republicans became Democrats and Democrats were picked. I'm not sure when that happened. They keep talking about that. But it really is amazing to me that the Democrats still persist with this anti-gun. They want to remove guns, limit guns, eliminate guns. What was it? Dianne Feinstein. She's like, if I could remove every gun,
Oh,
And she
I remember that. She was on Diane Sawyer, I think, and it was,
yes,
if
yes.
I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn in your guns. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a 60 Minutes interview,
Yeah.
and she
I
carried a gun.
Yeah. She was one of the few people in San Francisco, or wait, was it did she live in San Francisco? I don't remember.
I I believe it's that area. I mean,
Yeah. But
fact
yeah,
check me on that.
this was back in the 80s and 90s when, it was extremely difficult to get a carry permit in
Hmm.
some parts of
Hmm.
California. Yeah, she had a carry permit, and I think she had a carry permit for something like 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, she was talking about. I believe it was going to see her husband in the hospital, and she only felt safe because she had a gun.
Yeah. Mind you, she wants to disarm every law-abiding public American. So, but
And that's what I say to all of these, Bloomberg and all them. You first.
yeah, the, the hypocrisy knows no bound, and whenever they say, you don't need a gun, I always tell them every anti-gunner has a gun. The difference is they just pay someone to carry it for them.
Right. Yep.
That's
Yep.
what it comes down to. But
Well, and keep it in Florida here, David Hogg. It's always so funny that he has armed security around him, and people are always photographing it and pointing it out.
yeah, I remember I confronted David Hogg back in 2018 at the anti-Parkland gun control rally, and of course he had his security detail with even then. And I just laughed at it. I was like, really? You're here across the street from the Capitol rallying people to support the Parkland gun control bill? Mind you, he was, this was Parkland just happened, and he was
Hmm.
already there as a political figure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And someone paid for a security detail for him and a
Hmm.
couple of other high-profile anti-gunners. And I just laughed. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absolute hypocrisy for the fact that you guys need an armed security detail. Well, if you go to the state capitol courtyard, all of us are armed. We don't have a detail. We're providing it all for our own. And guess what?
Right.
Nothing bad's
Right.
happening.
And I often wonder, I'm like, are you a useful idiot or are you a true believer? And if you're a true believer, then why do you have armed security? So it leads me to believe the useful idiot.
Very much so. The Democrats back in the 1860s wanted to physically keep people on the plantation. Today, they want to keep them on the political plantation.
Yeah.
And gun control is the same thing. It's not about stopping crime. It's not about reducing violence. It's about controlling people and making them subservient to the state. Because if they have a monopoly of power, and what it comes down to is a monopoly of violence, because even the communists understood this. Mao Zedong, the brutal dictator of communist China, said it best: political power flows from the barrel of a gun. He understood that if the state was armed, they're able to control the people, and the people aren't able to resist, then they win. That's what they want. They want power. And the ultimate hypocrisy is in Florida, where a Republican supermajority state, and as you know, the great switch, you have Republicans now are defending Democrat policy and Democrat gun control. I mean,
Yep.
the fact that our current open carry ban was pushed by Janet Reno in 1987, and you have Republicans in the legislature that to this day don't want to repeal it. They're literally defending Democrat gun control policies, but every word out of their mouth is the Democrats are there to take away your rights. Then why the heck are you guys defending this?
Right. Yeah, that's pretty shocking to me that we're still living in the Stone Age. And again, Florida, the gunshine state. Everybody thinks we're
Which we ain't.
gun crazy, whatever. The only good thing I can say about Florida is one, the state has you can't have local counties and townships making their own rules about firearms. So
Yeah, state
that's
preemption.
preemption, yes. And the other good thing, which I love, if you have greater than an acre, you can shoot on your property. So the requirements are greater than an acre, and the rounds don't leave your property.
Yeah, and the thing is, it used to be there was no lot size restriction, because when I lived out in Jefferson County, Florida, out by Monticello, I didn't live on an acre. I lived on a little partridge, on a little postage stamp that I subleased from the property owner. But it was rural living. Back then, I could legally shoot, and sadly, Republicans increased it to where it has to be an acre now. And I'm not saying that, look, you should set up an indoor range for 50 BMG if you live in a condo down in South Beach. Right, but if you're a responsible individual and you're able to shoot safely on your property, the whole thing of an acre or less or more is stupid, because you could safely set up a shooting range on less than an acre. You create a proper backstop, you have a proper bullet stop, you know what you're at, what's your target is, what's behind your target, the capability of your firearm. Because look, back in the day, you had gallery guns, a 22 short or a 22 pistol with 22 long rifle ammunition. That's plenty safe to shoot in an indoor range. 7 yards is far less than an acre, but that could be shot safely. But now, because of Republicans, they increased it to, you need an acre or more. That makes no sense. Why is it that if I lived on a half-acre property in undeveloped Jefferson County, I was restricted? Now, that's stupid. It just
I fully agree with you. I would love to have like 100-yard range. I measured it, just by pacing it. It's like, from the front yard all the way to the back edge of the backyard would just about be 100 yards.
Yep.
But that isn't really practical either,
Yeah. But the issue is that the legislature continues thinking that Floridians are stupid. What makes us any different than Americans in Georgia and Alabama and Texas and Mississippi and Wyoming or Tennessee and everywhere else where they have far more rights with their Second Amendment? The ability to exercise the Second Amendment. A great example of that is our under 21 purchase and carry ban. The state keeps arguing that someone under the age of 21 doesn't have the mental faculties to safely possess and carry a firearm. Yet, the state of Florida will let someone at 19 years old be a cop. So a 19-year-old will be entrusted to carry a firearm as an armed agent of the state and be vested with the full authority of the state to enforce law and use force up to and including lethal force if necessary. And they're saying that's fine. But that John Q. citizen under the age of 21 is too stupid to go to their local gun shop and purchase a $200 Mossberg Maverick 88 to keep in their rat hole apartment as they're living off campus to defend themselves from gangbangers. And again,
now, is it
Republicans?
Is it the Florida Department of Tourism that's pushing back on gun laws? Is that what? Because I've always heard it was the Florida Department of Tourism.
There doesn't even exist a Florida Department of Tourism. So the way it works in Florida is the state has a state-owned for-profit corporation called Visit Florida. Okay. And they're the guys that they promote Florida. And, if you go to any rest stop and you see all the little stands with the pamphlets of all the different attractions and the commercials and all that when you're outside of the state, that's Visit Florida. And the funny thing is, Visit Florida tracks who comes to the state. And they track it to where either if they're Americans, if they're from Canada or Mexico, or if they're from elsewhere. And out of all of that tracking, 96% of all visitors that visit Florida are Americans. They come from other states or territories of the U.S. So they come from Georgia, Alabama, New York, Puerto Rico, Washington, Hawaii, whatever. They're Americans. 96% on average are American. Only 4% of all tourists that visit the U.S. that visit Florida are foreigners from another country. And it's really not the tourists. It's not Visit Florida saying, if we have open carry, it's bad. If we liberalize gun rights, it's bad. It's Republican lawmakers promoting that myth.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now, but there's a Republican lawmaker out of the Orlando area, David something. A year or two back, we got him on record, and this was before permitless carry passed.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said, look, I'm against permitless carry and open carry because of tourism. You have all these rich Europeans coming here, and we can't scare them away. And basically it was like, so you think the rights of Floridians and Americans as a whole are not as valuable as 4% of tourists blowing their money in Florida, when in reality the vast majority of the entire tourist industry is funded by Americans who come from states that have open carry, that have permitless carry, that have less gun-free zones, that have no waiting periods for the purchasing of firearms. Like, this isn't a problem where they're from, but you think it's going to scare them to come here? You guys are stupid.
But so there's a couple of things that I think about. What I forgot, there was two things that happened in Texas. One was like open carry, and there was, in each time, the law relaxing gun control went into effect. The streets will run red with blood in Texas. And I think it was like open carry and permitless carry. And none of that's happened. And I can't remember the last time I was in Texas that I actually saw someone open carry.
Last time I was in Texas was last year. I saw a couple of folks open carrying, and no one paid them any attention. They were going around their day as if it was no different than anyone else. And when I lived in Tallahassee on the border of Florida and Georgia, I'd cross into Georgia. I'd open carry. I'd go shopping there. No one paid any mind. No one cared. Heck, we would have a couple of guys come across the border from Georgia to go shopping in Florida. Mind you, they open carried. They didn't realize Florida wasn't an open carry state.
Oh shit!
And it wasn't. And it was like one of those. Like, I'd go up to them and was like, "Dude, I'm not against this, but I'm just letting you know, if like Tallahassee PD catches you, they're gonna cuff and stuff you, man." They're like, "Wait, why?" Yeah. I'm like, "Open carry is legal." Oh, really? The rest of the public didn't care.
Yep.
There was no issue. It's the argument that always, there's going to be a rise in crime rate. There's going to be blood in the street. That same argument was made back in 1987 when Florida passed shell-issue CCW permits. That issue was passed when Florida went from resident-only permits to non-resident permits. That issue was passed when Florida instituted stand your ground and castle doctrine and preemption laws. And guess what? None of that has happened. None of that has happened in any state where they have relaxed and liberalized gun rights, because the only place that crime rates go up is when you have gun control enforced. We could look at California. We could look at New York. We could look at Illinois as prime examples. Everything Kamala Harris wants to do on a federal level, they did it in California when she was the attorney general there.
Yeah.
Has their crime rates plummeted? No, not at all. Their crime rates keep going up. Why? Because criminals know it is an easy target. It's an easy place.
It's funny. My father, I grew up in New York. My father said all the time, the only thing gun laws protect is the criminal. And in New York, it was the Sullivan laws. In Sullivan, he was like a Tammany Hall boss, and he was suffering from syphilis, and part of syphilis is paranoia, and wanted everybody disarmed.
Yeah, in 1911, the Sullivan Act was passed specifically because Tammany Hall was afraid of the Italian immigrants and the Eastern European immigrants that were moving in. Were going to move in on their turf, take their jobs, and run a criminal empire. And the only reason why the Italian mob even existed in New York was partially because of Tammany Hall creating so many laws and regulations that disenfranchised recently arriving immigrants, that the immigrants said, fine, you're going to label me as a criminal. I might as well act as one, because you guys aren't letting me compete legally I still got to put bread on the table and a roof over the head. Fine, I'll do it like we did in the old country. They created the very situation they were trying to prevent with the enactment of gun control and their various vice laws and anti-immigrant stance. It goes to show you that in the end, government, whenever they pass any of these laws, it's always targeting some new group, some oppressed group, some group they want to oppress and control.
Yeah, I keep thinking about John Lott's book, More Guns, Less Crime, and John Lott was at the GOA goals. I missed him. I'm like, I want to talk to him, but same as any event, whether it's just a range day or SHOT Show or something like that. It's like legitimately like me, Crump, and Dark, and a couple other guys will get together. We're like, we want to go here. We take 2 steps in one direction, everybody's gone because there was a shiny object. So I missed. So I really want to meet him, shake his hand, get a signed book or something, and I missed that opportunity.
I missed John Lott, but I did get to say hi to Dick Keller and get a photograph with him. So that was cool.
I always get a dick pic.
Of course, we did get to bump into each other for a total of 20 seconds.
Okay.
And then, because of course, as you know, I was working the floor, I was working the media, I was working our main booth and everything else. But Goals was fantastic, man. I loved it. Definitely will be there next year.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I really enjoyed the event. I like the way it was done. Definitely the range day, the media day, and then open to the public, because then it gives us a chance. As a content creator, it gives me a chance to shoot new guns that come out, make some content with that. Go to each booth and make make content with whatever booths that are there, and then meet the public, meet people that watch our content. So that's always fun.
Yeah, and it again, I think Goals went off without a hitch, and every vendor and media person I spoke to, they said the same thing. Dude, we're gonna skip some of the shows next year, and we're gonna come to yours again. And for me, that is a ringing endorsement. But it was
than
fantastic.
Being hilly, which hey, that's terrain. It's not Florida. Parking was easy. Getting around was easy. It's like Vegas. Typically, I mean, I did Uber just because I carpooled, but it would have been just as easy for me to take my own car. And I think next year I'm going to do that, just because usually I was with Chris from the 740, and just about every day, whether it was range day or days at the show, he wanted to leave early, and I wanted to stay the whole day because I'm like, all right, I drove stupid number of hours to get here. I'm going to be here all day long. But I think the layout of it, definitely range day, media day, and then 2 days open to the public, that worked out great.
I think it did. My only fault, and it's not an issue with the event or Goals, it's the city of Knoxville. I went to 4 different bars. None of them had Bacardi. I couldn't order a proper Cuba Libre, a rum and Coke with lime.
Yeah.
Because no one had Bacardi. All they had was the Sailor Jerry spiced rum stuff. I'm like, no, you don't do a rum and Coke with that. You have to do it with, Bacardi, either Bacardi Light or Bacardi Gold.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. As a Cuban, I think it was just a vast conspiracy. They were specifically targeting me.
All the New York bars carry Bacardi. That's standard. And I don't know. Actually, I didn't drink it all while I was there. Chris from the 740 had the fridge stocked with beers, and I'm like, dude, you're up early, out late, you're on your feet all day. I'm like, yeah, last thing I want to do is drink. It's just going to make it harder.
For me, it was just the simple fact of, after doing 12 to 18-hour days, because setting up the booth, tearing down the booth, and all the work that goes into it before the public even steps in. For me, it was just like, yeah, I'm going to unwind by having a drink. No one had my drink of choice.
See, I like Captain Morgan spiced rum. That's good.
Yeah, but you don't do it with a rum and Coke.
Yeah, I've done it.
No. I would put the cigar out on you right now, but I'm not going to.
No, that's like, all right. Yeah, I was looking to hang out and smoke cigars. I know there was a cigar bar in the area,
Yes.
but I didn't get to it.
There were some very nice cigars. Let's see. I think I still have one left. There we go. First Responders Alpha Cigar Company. Let's see if I can get it here.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's not focusing. You gotta hold your hand up to get it to focus.
Yeah, it's just me. I'm just the ugly one. But yeah, those were the cigars at the cigar bar. They were a nice mild cigar. It was a very very good aroma, excellent flavor, excellent body.
Oh, nice.
It was a good cigar.
I spent my whole time on the floor. I didn't get around to any of the meetings or any of the events, and I barely like cruised by the GOA booth for the book signings and stuff. It's like I just kind of like walked by every once in a while, or because believe it or not, it wasn't a big event, but there was enough going on that even at like Iraq Veteran, which isn't a big event, I don't get to see everybody there. Like I'll look at other YouTubers' videos from Iraq Veteran, and I'm like, where was that? I didn't see that. Or like, I didn't get to shoot that gun. Where'd that come from?
Yep. It was big enough that you couldn't do it all in one day. And
GOA had really good cookies. I clicked on the wrong one.
And on top of that, we also had, of course, the classes. We had the panels. We had the main speakers. I was part of 2 panels. I was part of the state and local lobbying panel and the police panel. And look, on the police panel, I flat out stated, police right now, they're the vanguards of the state, and that's wrong. They need to be the vanguards of the people. Our entire role as law enforcement is we need to protect people's rights, not enforce the government's will.
Right.
And the crowd took that with enthusiasm, and I hope they did, because that's a solid message that I fully believe in. You know, we need to, law enforcement as a whole, and I'm not trying to disparage my brothers and sisters that wear the badge. I know there's plenty of good cops that are pro-gun. But a lot of them are politically shackled because of their careers, or leadership silences them. But you'll have a chief of police, you'll have a sheriff stand on the dais in a committee chamber at the Capitol and say, oh, well, I'm against this and we're against that, and it's bad. Mind you, the rank and file for that agency is like, that doesn't represent us. But if they speak out, then they're screwed. So the fact that I'm no longer sworn and that I'm working for GOA, I am taking this opportunity to speak for those who are silenced and say, that ain't the case. We do have some bad cops, as we've seen, like what we saw in Columbia County, where you had 2 deputies harass a blind guy who was reporting to jury duty. You remember this one.
Yes.
But yeah, they thought his seeing eye, his folded up seeing, for folks watching that don't know, you had a blind gentleman reporting to the courthouse for jury duty, and he had his seeing eye cane folded up in his back pocket. 2 Columbia County deputies up in North Florida thought that was a gun that he was open carrying, and they started harassing him. And when they found out it wasn't a gun, instead of just saying, hey, our bad, they still arrested him, instead of for open carry, for disorderly conduct. Again, you have these issues with law enforcement. You know, you do have bad apples in the bunch. And also you have that incident out in Escambia, out on the far end of the Panhandle, where that Air Force airman sadly was killed for answering a door while he had a firearm in his hand. And he wasn't pointing it. He didn't bring it up. He simply had, and he was ventilated for it. And Escambia is a strong pro-military community. There's a lot of veterans there. And one of the things I've heard is, well, you know, the officer had to defend himself. He didn't know if the airman was going to point the gun at him. Here's the thing. A lot of combat vets who saw tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, they dealt with Iraqi and Afghans who were armed. Guess what? They didn't ventilate them.
Right.
Those people were going around their day with an AK slung on their back. What makes that any different than here in the U.S.? We have the right to keep and bear arms. Just because someone is carrying a firearm doesn't mean they're a bad guy. And that's a major problem here in Florida with law enforcement training. Law enforcement training in Florida is non-cop with a gun, automatically a bad guy. Treat him like a bad guy. And that's not the case.
Yeah, I'm always shocked. I'm always surprised at people's knowledge of laws, and but then they don't even make it easy for me or John Crump that follow, courts very closely. I hate to say it, I kind of scratch my head. I'm like, so braces are legal, 80% frames are legal, because for a while it was going back and forth because there'd be a stay, there would be whatever. It's like it's not as simple, and the regulations overall regarding firearms or even knives, like we've talked about a couple of knife decisions recently.
You had California say a switchblade isn't covered by the Second Amendment, but I think it was Massachusetts that said it is. And I'll give you another horrible but great example of Florida, and this involves Minnesota. So Minnesota had a court ruling that said the under 21 ban to carry a firearm in Minnesota is unconstitutional. The Florida Attorney General, Ashley Moody, was promoting on X, posting, oh, we were part of that. We did an amicus brief. We were supportive of fighting that challenge, blah, 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 blah. So my answer to Ashley Moody, the Florida Attorney General, is this. Are you going to now publicly state that Florida's under 21 carry ban and purchase ban is unconstitutional, or are you going to defend it in court? Put up or shut up. You're the AG of Florida. You're the top lawyer in Florida. You're putting political capital to fight gun control in other states. I want the Florida AG to put up or shut up. Is she going to stand and state that the laws we are challenging in our lawsuit are clearly unconstitutional and she will not enforce them, that she will issue a directive to not enforce them? Because remember, during the whole pistol brace thing, she sent out a directive statewide saying, Florida law enforcement, don't touch pistol braces. It's not illegal in Florida. So I want her, she claims she's pro-gun, put up or shut up time, Moody. Make a statement. Florida's under 21 carry and purchase laws and open carry ban are unconstitutional.
Now, just going back to like David Hogg stuff, in Florida, we have, with that, was it 30 days after they passed all of these restrictions, like red flag laws, enhanced triggers?
15 days. They did it in 15 days. They halfway through session, from the bill being introduced to going through all the committee votes to being on Rick Scott's desk to be signed into law. 15 days.
And if I recall, that was like 142 pages. That was...
Oh, it was over. You're talking about hundreds of pages, because it wasn't just gun control. It was a whole bunch of crap thrown in it.
So in the state of Florida, and I know if you're a P1 listener of this channel, you've heard me say this many times. A lot of people don't hear you say it because they don't watch every show. But if I bought, let's say, a Anderson completely built and took out the trigger that came with it because I had somebody gifted me a Geisley trigger and dropped that in Florida, I would be in violation of the law.
That could be constituted as a felony because you are, quote unquote, increasing the rate of fire of the firearm.
So it doesn't specifically say binary FRT competition trigger. It just says like enhanced.
Yeah, if you increase it says if you increase the rate of fire, if you enhance the firearm to where you can increase the rate of fire, it is now a felony. So if I buy a bog standard Glock and I put an Apex or Ghost trigger in it, I'm technically committing a felony. If I have an AR and I put a Geisley trigger in it, I'm technically committing a felony. If I take one of my Smith & Wesson revolvers and I get an Apex spring kit and I throw it in it to lighten the mainspring and rebound spring in it to so it's a lighter overall trigger pull weight. I'm technically increasing the rate of fire. That's a felony. That is the stupidity and the danger of what our Republican supermajority has done here in Florida. Because mind you, all these lawmakers campaign that, the Democrats are after your guns. Vote for me. I'm Republican. I'll keep you safe. It's a Republican that did all this.
Yeah. I mean, is it an education thing? What is it that the Florida Republicans aren't pro-gun?
Part of it comes down to 3 to 4 issues. One, a caucus within the Republican Party are folks, and I'm not saying that it's just you in general, but folks like you. They fled the Northeast, but they're the country club Rockefeller style Republicans. Their mindset is
Northeast Republican.
Northeast country club Republicans. They're in favor of a lower tax rate and they're pro corporate business policy. That's it. They don't like the idea of the hired help being armed.
Right.
Another caucus within the Republican Party is they're former Jim Crow Southern Blue Dog Democrats. They're good old boys and for folks watching that don't know, a Florida cracker ain't a white guy. A Florida cracker goes back to someone that can trace their lineage back to the 1800s because the cattle drivers used whips to drive the cattle herds. So hence why the term Florida crackers, but they're good old Florida crackers. And for them, it's the same thing. We can't have the hired help be armed. At a Republican quarterly meeting, I literally had a Republican Party official tell me, we can't have open carry in Florida. God forbid my wife sees a black guy carry a gun out of Piggly Wiggly.
Ouch.
That's some of it. The other part is that guns isn't their forte, and they listen to the Florida Sheriff's Association, which is extremely and historically been anti-gun. They've fought every pro-gun bill that has ever been introduced. And as you saw last session, our illustrious term-limited Senate President Kathleen Pasadomo, when asked about open carry, she says, I don't know the front end of a gun. I listen to the experts. I listen to the Florida Sheriff's Association. So if they tell me it's bad, it's bad.
Right.
You got that. And then the last part of it is you just have moderate Democrats that run under the Republican banner because they know they wouldn't win as Democrats. That's the issue in Florida.
I wanted to answer Brandon's question here, and I, not that it's a good answer, it's something I know. Another YouTuber I know, he works with Franklin Armory, and Franklin Armory has a binary trigger. And so instead of them sending him a trigger to put in, what he does is he has them send him a whole gun with the trigger already in it, and then he sends the gun back to them. When it's a T&E, when he's, given a firearm to make videos.
Yeah, and even then, you could have some state attorney's offices just declare the binary trigger or force reset trigger to be similar to a bump stock, and automatically it's a felony. It's right. The law is just so vaguely written that there's a danger of that you could have just, one state attorney in one judicial circuit versus another could be like, no, that's a felony. And because the law is so vaguely written, we're all at risk.
And I guess the thing in my mind is going back to an AR. I got an Anderson AR. I put a Geisley trigger in it. How would anybody know?
They wouldn't, but again, the problem is that you have a felony possibly hanging over you like the sword of Damocles. Right. And it just takes that 1 in a million chance of the stars aligned, and you get screwed over by law enforcement, by the state attorney's office. And next thing you know, you're fighting for your rights in court when you did nothing absolutely wrong.
Right. And I mean, what if I had a Beretta, and I just spent some time with my Dremel and a grinding stone and polished everything up.
Again, that's the issue. I mean, look, as a revolver connoisseur, smoothing out all the bearing surfaces in a revolver's action could increase the rate of fire because it reduces the trigger pull weight. Replacing the mainspring and rebound spring does that. Polishing up the insides of a 1911, polishing up the sear engagement, the mainspring housing, the I'm having a brain fart. I can't remember the barrel link, all of that. The lapping the locking lugs on the barrel hood and within the slide of a 911. That could increase the rate of fire. So all of this is just vaguely up to interpretation. And right now, it's just because you have state attorney's offices that they're not looking into it, but it could be a felony. I mean, it's as simple as, back up in the Northeast of, remember when they passed the SAFE Act, how it was originally written. Okay, you're limited. You're limited. If you have a magazine that has over 10 rounds, it's an automatic felony. You could possess 10-round mags, but you can't put more than 7 rounds in it.
Yes.
How stupid is that? That is the issue. That is Florida's law.
And initially, they didn't exempt police from that.
Yeah, and the state attorney and the they call them something different in New York. I think they call them district attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah, the DAs up there basically told me, don't worry, even though it's against the law, we're not going to charge you guys. You guys are good. The legislature will pass a fix-it bill. Meanwhile, every law-abiding New York gun owner is getting screwed over and having to fight it tooth and nail in court. I mean, that's...
So my flight instructor in New York owns an auto parts store. And to show that he has a reason to carry a gun, he has to every year show them that he carries this much money and goes to the bank and makes deposits.
Yep.
So I love how these acts are named. What is it? The Concealed Carry Improvement Act now made it illegal for him to carry a gun to the bank.
Yes.
So he has to prove he can have a gun by showing that he carries a gun to take cash deposits to the bank. Yep. But now he can't carry the gun to the bank.
No, it's just outright hypocrisy. It's them trying to throw mud to the wall to see what sticks in terms of violating our rights. And they're going to keep doing it, but that's why GOA is there, and we're going to keep fighting it. And it doesn't matter if it's New York, California, Florida, elsewhere. If there's something unconstitutional, by God, we're going to fight it. And we don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. If you're anti-gun, we're going to challenge you.
Yeah.
I mean,
amen.
A great example of that was Governor DeSantis. He campaigned, before 2022 when he was running for re-election as governor. He was campaigning, gun-free zones are bad. He got caught having his events being gun-free zones.
Yeah.
And we railed him up for it. We raked him through the coals for it. And everyone's like, oh my God, but he's the most pro-gun governor. Doesn't matter. That's the difference. Yeah. We don't operate off access-based lobbying. We're not there to pet them. We're not going to stroke their egos. We believe fully in confrontational politics. You do your job, great. We thank you. You don't do your job, we will go after you. We're not there to make friends. We're not there to get a seat at the table. We're there to flip the table over and make sure that people's rights are respected and restored. No more, no less.
Amen. So, Lewis, where can people find you?
Well, best way to find me is my handle on Twitter X is RealFL Lobby Gun Lobby. I'm constantly posting my mental machinations there. Sometimes at 3 a.m. at Lawmakers, but other than that, they could join our Florida Facebook page, Gun Owners of America, Florida. That's a great way to follow us, and of course, join GOA. Just go to gunowners.org/join. It's $25 a year. Every penny goes towards the fight. You get up-to-the-date information on what's going on in the local, state, and federal level. But other than that, Another way to find me is you can go to New Wave Firearms. That's my YouTube channel. It's kind of piddling and slow, but there's going to be a lot more content going on there. A lot of it is going to be not just firearms reviews and revolver rants and things of that sort, but it'll be up-to-date information on what's going on here in Florida with GOA.
Very cool. Lewis, thank you for coming on again, and good seeing you as always.
Brother, it's always great being on you, and the fact that being on the show, and the fact that I think we're only about an hour and a half away from each other. We definitely got to meet up and have a drink or two. But more importantly, we got to be together in the same studio for another episode.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yep.
All right, Lewis. Thank you.
Peace out.